Thanks for joining us today for Cyber Warfare, Responding to Cyber Intrusions. This presentation of Janus Associates and Associates is fully copyrighted. My name is Matthew Lane, and I will be your moderator today, and our presenter will be Lyle Lieberman. Now I'm looking at the list of all the people who have signed on already, and a lot of you know who we are already, your existing clients or past clients. For those of you who don't know us, though, Janus Associates is a U.S.-based security consulting company founded in 1988. We specialize only in cybersecurity and privacy issues. We don't sell hardware or software or licenses or devices, and what that means is that we're vendor agnostic. When we come in and do an assessment for our clients know that we're not trying to just sell them more equipment. We have clients across all sectors of government, commercial, higher education, and nonprofit. And the demographics of this webinar actually sort of prove that. We have people from 5 different countries listening to us right now, people from the banking industry and finance industry, healthcare. So there's a lot of folks that deal with industrial controls, federal government, state government, and local municipalities are all logged onto this webinar, and I think that shows the breadth of our experience. We have locations in Stamford, Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, Waltham, Massachusetts, Baltimore, Austin, Texas, and Philadelphia. So let me just give you a quick 2 minutes on who Janus is and sort of some of the service offerings that we provide. We do a lot of governance, risk, and compliance for our clients. We do security architecture review and analysis to make sure that systems are designed correctly. We do independent verification and validation of systems. We do application and data security, where we test applications to make sure that they're built correctly and make sure that data is staying where it's supposed to and not leaving the environment. We'll talk about that a little bit later, of course. We do a lot of penetration testing, security assessments, current state assessments, future state assessments, to make sure that we can build a security roadmap to keep environments secure down the road. We also help our clients understand what it means to move to the cloud, if it's advantageous to move data to the cloud, or whether that represents too much of a risk of losing their information once it's out into the cloud. And we do a lot of advisory services. We're actually the acting CISO for many of our clients. A lot of our clients feel that it's better to outsource security as a service in some cases, and we help them understand that. Now, today's presenter is Lyle Lieberman. Lyle is a 15-year veteran of the security sector. For the first 5 years, he was in the physical security space and was responsible for the design and sourcing of major access control product lines for a leading manufacturer. Prior to joining Janus, he was involved with artificial intelligence-based software that monitored live CCTV feeds, assessing threats and generating alarms in real time. He's a member of the Connecticut Technology Council's Cybersecurity Task Force and the New York, New Jersey Electronic Crimes Task Force, which is a strategic alliance of the U.S. Secret Service, private industry, academia, and other local, state, federal, and international law enforcement officials that work together to combat electronic crime and protect the nation's critical infrastructure. He's been with Janus for the last 10 years, and he's currently the Chief Operating Officer of the firm. So, Lyle, tag, you're it.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Thanks for the introductions. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a good deal of information to cover in a short time, so why don't we get started? The information contained on this slide is from the latest Duke University CFO Magazine Global Business Outlook Survey, which ended this past March. John Graham, director of the survey and a professor at Duke University, was quoted as saying, "Corporate America is an easy mark for hackers, as we are repeatedly reminded every day in the news." He went on to say that no one appears safe. The situation may be even worse than reported because many firms might not realize that they have been attacked. Results show small firms are only about half as likely as large firms to attempt a friendly hack into their own systems, to hire new data security staff, or to require data security training for employees. The success rate of hacking small and medium-sized firms is a direct result of fewer resources being dedicated to data security at these firms. I'd like you to take a moment and read the information that's in front of you on the slide. The most important takeaway from this presentation today should be that you need to be aware and you need to take precautions now, not later, but now, to protect your organization's best interest. So can you really afford a problem, a data breach? Where does your organization fall in on this chart? Can you afford to lose 55% of your business? Can you afford to even lose 24%? I think it's pretty safe to say the answer is no, and that even a 24% loss would be catastrophic to most entities. But it does happen, and the best example I can think of is my wife. She was part of the Target breach, and she didn't return to their stores for 18 months. Even today, she hasn't returned to the level of business she once did with them. So how much did the Target breach cost them? As of today, gross expenses totaled in excess of $252 million. That's over $250 million. As for their reputation, well, I don't think there's any way you can affix a dollar value to the hit they took. Nonetheless, they can afford it, unlike most organizations that can't. Today's presentation will address 4 specific areas. They are who the different actors are, what their motivations are, what they are after, and how they are getting your data. The next section is how to protect your organization prior to a hack, and that's a look at best practices. After that, we'll look at what happens when you're under attack, what you need to do and what you shouldn't do. Also, the value of an incident response plan. After that, we'll take a look at getting your operations and business up and running after an attack, why a data breach-based business continuity and disaster recovery plan is a necessity. And then lastly, we'll do some question and answers. Okay, Matt, let's go to the next slide, and I'll start discussing who the different actors are. So the first one up on the screen is the hacker. The term hacker goes back to the 1960s when it was originally used to describe individuals who would make innovative, quick changes to electronic equipment. It evolved to include other individuals who made quick and innovative changes to software. Additionally, it would describe users who circumvented telephone systems. Today, the common use of the term describes someone who circumvents computer security controls, and hacker is a general term. What this doesn't describe is the motivation behind the hacker. For that, we need some other definitions. Next up is the hacktivist. Hacktivism is generally considered to occur when the hacker is looking to promote a social or political agenda. We generally see hacktivism in the form of website defacement, denial of service attacks, site parodies, and typo squatting. Now, some of you may not be familiar with the term typo squatting, so let me shed some light on this. Typo squatting is when the website address you think you are going to is really not the site you thought it was. And a real good example of this was the www.whitehouse.com, which actually resolved to an adult site. The real White House site URL is www.whitehouse.gov, not .com. So the key here is that their intent is to make a point. The hacktivist wants to do what they consider to be the right thing in their mind. They want to do good for their cause, and that's their motivation. I should also note that hacktivists are not state-sponsored entities. They are generally independent individuals or organizations. The next player is the cyber terrorist. So a close cousin to a hacktivist is a cyber terrorist. Like the hacktivist, they are politically and or sometimes socially motivated. However, they are not beyond causing real damage or injuries. This type of activity includes cases where air traffic control has been disrupted, 9/11 systems were disabled, and public utilities were compromised. Cyber terrorists may act alone or in groups, and they may be linked to a political organization, or in the worst case, be sponsored by a country. Next is the cyber criminal. So another term you hear a lot today is cybercrime. Cyber criminals are hackers who certainly are breaking the law. But in general, we see their motivation as being more financial. They're often part of an organized crime syndicate and can be associated with a country or geographic region such as Eastern Europe. Cybercrime ranges from theft of credit card information, personally identifiable information, competitive data, and intellectual property. In other words, pretty much anything they can use for their own personal gain or sell to someone else. It's all about the money. It's all about monetizing the data they've stolen. These are criminals who are seeking to commit fraud and steal your sensitive information. Finally, we have the concept of the cyber warrior. This type of hacker is generally sponsored by a country or is part of the military. This is a picture of the China Blue Army, which is a state-sponsored cyber warrior unit comprised of highly trained hackers. They perform all of the regular warlike activities at a cyber level, including espionage, reconnaissance, arms proliferation, carrying out attacks, and in some cases even defending their own environment against attacks from other cyber warriors. In the case of the cyber warrior, their activities are controlled by a larger command structure, and they may be integrated into a larger traditional war activity and political maneuvering too. So in short, the cyber warrior is part of the larger command structure, and they're the boots on the ground in the cybersphere. Now, I'd like to take a moment to clarify that these definitions are fairly simplified, and it's possible that a hacker can be 20% cyber hacktivist, 40% cyber criminal, 10% cyber warrior, and 30% cyber terrorist. Any individual or group can be motivated by multiple goals. Understand this: the cyber criminal wants to steal money from the bank, while the cyber warrior wants to break the bank and cripple the economy. So now that we've defined the actors, let's take a look at how the bad guys are getting into your systems and stealing your data. Let's first talk about web-based penetration. So web-based penetration can be accomplished by a number of means. It's usually a result of unpatched applications or zero-day flaws. Depending on the situation, the attacker may choose to gain a foothold on your system via a web application flaw and use this access to pivot or move laterally within your network to attack other applications or gain access to your file servers. They may also use an unpatched flaw to download malware to unsuspecting users of the page. This malware may install keystroke loggers or remote access tools that would allow the attacker to take over the user's machine, which could then be used as part of an overall larger botnet. And for those of you who aren't familiar with botnets are what are generally used to deliver denial of service attacks. Another way that they get your data is through network penetration. IP address ranges for organizations are easily located with domain listing services and also through readily available tools. Attackers can even scan the web looking for signatures of specific devices that have older known security flaws or unknown zero-day flaws. With this information, they can launch attacks and commandeer devices or gain access to your internal networks. Often, they will sit quietly inside your network for days, weeks, or even months, performing reconnaissance as they look for login information, how the network is configured, and where data is stored. They remain in a stealth mode until they're ready to attack, which is often a time of normally high activity. This activity masks their actions as they send your data out of your network. Another method of attack is two-pronged. Everything is pretty much the same as I just described, but the attackers launch a distributed denial of service attack, also known as a DDoS attack, on your website or your e-commerce site. While your IT staff is running full speed and completely focused on mitigating the DDoS attack, The bad guys are exfiltrating large amounts of data out the back door. By the time they are discovered, it's generally too late. They've done their damage and they've taken what they wanted. This is one area where high quality and properly configured firewalls and intrusion detection systems can save the day and your data. The next way the bad guys get your data is through stolen or lost equipment. Stolen or lost hardware can be as simple as a lost USB memory stick on up to a laptop that was accidentally left behind at an airport, or stolen from an office, a parked car, a hotel room, or even the employee's home. These devices may contain files such as spreadsheets, Word documents, emails, and even login credentials. The way to protect all of this hardware can be summed up in 2 words: data encryption. For those of you who aren't familiar with data encryption, it's a method that encodes messages or information in such a way that only authorized parties can read it. Encryption doesn't in itself prevent interception, but it does deny message content access to unauthorized people. Encryption can be applied to individual files or entire devices, such as an external drive or a laptop. In the case of a fully encrypted device, you must have the proper key, which is usually a password. This key unlocks the device and at the same time can also unencrypt the data on that device. Another way that they get your data is through physical site penetration. And physical site penetration can occur in a number of ways, including someone just walking in the front door, someone posing as a service tech for the office equipment, or even pretending to be a meter reader for a public utility such as the electric company. In cases like this, they exude an air of confidence and authority, and they are often not challenged. Another common ploy is for the perpetrator to pretend that he or she is a new hire. In any event, they may be looking to photograph or steal documents left unsecured or on desktops, or they may be looking to attach a device onto your network that would allow them to remotely access your systems. They may even attempt to plug a USB memory stick into a workstation and download malware that could capture data such as login credentials, and in turn, send that information off-site. Worse yet, the malware may open a backdoor allowing them partial or even full access to your network. Probably one of the most widely used methods of stealing data is through social engineering. And it's probably the most insidious of all because it takes the best parts of human nature and it turns it against us. The best known method of social engineering is the phishing attack, which is launched by email. Now, we all know someone who has received a realistic looking email, supposedly from their bank, a retail store, or even their employer, that explains to the reader that some sort of update is needed and that they should click on the link and log on. The unwary person does exactly that and ends up giving away their user ID and password. Simultaneously, the bad guys may even download malware that allows remote access to the unsuspecting user's system. Some things to look for in identifying a phishing attempt include an email with misspellings, bad grammar, and the request to click here to log in. No legitimate organization will ever include a link to log in. As part of the security engagement that we recently performed on a large-scale phishing attack, we sent out over 60,000 emails to this organization's employees that included a blatant misspelling of the organization's name. Over 1,000 people clicked on the link and attempted to log in, and in doing so sent us their user IDs and passwords. As shocking as this sounds, it's really not that unusual. Actually, it's quite normal for tests of these size. And all it takes is one set of credentials for the bad guys to get into your system. Other types of social engineering include dropping booby-trapped USB sticks in an area where employees find them, such as a lobby, a cafeteria, or an employee parking lot. Their curiosity takes over, so they plug the USB stick in, and their systems are compromised without them ever even knowing it. Another method is telephone calls with spoofed caller IDs, where the caller pretends to be someone from HR looking for personally identifiable information. Maybe it's someone from IT claiming that there's a problem and requesting login credentials, or even someone from the bank needing to verify account numbers, user IDs, and passwords. All of these are just different forms of playing on human nature to get the information they're looking for. The best way to protect your organization from social engineering is by regularly scheduled employee security awareness training. Most organizations offer some form of training during the initial hiring process, and that's it. Research shows that this training should be given in a short interactive session of no longer than 15 to 20 minutes every 6 months in order to be effective. Janus offers both off-the-shelf and customized training, should any of you be interested in discussing this with us in greater detail. So now let's take a look at how to protect your organization prior to an attack, and let's examine some best practices. Now, some of us know from personal experience that many in our respective organizations will be like Bart and will have to be forced to adopt best practices. And many of them won't be happy about it at all. My response to them is, get over it. Obviously, you can't take that tact with the C-suite, even though you might like to. But you need to explain to them why adopting best practices on an enterprise level is in the best interest of everyone, and that they have to set the tone from the top down. You have a responsibility to your organization, regardless of your position, to protect it from an attack. In fact, every employee has that responsibility and needs to understand that they need to take ownership of data security at an individual level. Adopting best practices will help to minimize the likelihood of a successful attack on your organization. If you're considering cyber insurance, adopting best practices may lower your premiums. And if you're breached and the regulators or attorneys come after you, you can point to all you have done as a defense to blunt their actions and thus minimize your liability. Let's spend a few minutes discussing best practices to undertake prior to an attack. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Do you give your house keys to your neighbors? Do you ask a stranger to hold your phone or money for you? Well, of course not. You never do that. You know the people you trust, and you restrict access to things that are important to you to only those people. The same should hold true within your enterprise. One of the biggest threats is from insiders. And when hiring new employees, check their references, run a full background check, and if it's appropriate, have them complete an online personality screening that may help identify unwanted behaviors. Know your employees prior to hiring. Insider threats come in many forms. They could be trusted employees that have worked for you for years, or rogue employees that are actually agents of the bad guys. They could even be a contract worker or a vendor. Restrict access. This holds true for your workstations, applications, and your network in general. Have a set procedure every time you have an employee join your organization. Think carefully before you give them access to an application, and carefully consider if they really need to access that application in order to perform their job. If not, lock them out. When an employee leaves your organization, make sure you deactivate every aspect of that person. This includes retrieving physical keys and access control cards, changing passwords to voicemail, deactivating network access, email access, and don't forget to deactivate remote VPN capabilities. And you should be doing this immediately upon their separation. A good example of not doing this has come to light recently when the Houston Astros baseball team failed to deactivate remote access, and a former high-level employee now working for the St. Louis Cards accessed sensitive information. Currently, there's an ongoing federal investigation, and all of this, including the bad publicity surrounding it, could have been avoided by following best practices. I can't begin to tell you how many times during the course of client testing we have discovered active user IDs from employees and vendors that are no longer employed by that organization. Some have even been gone for as long as 4 or even 5 years. So again, shut them down immediately. The next thing I'd like to focus on is practicing good patch management. It's critically important that all of your hardware and software be up to date on their patches. In order to do this, you need to have a process in place that tracks and keeps record of all the patches. Why is this so important? Well, let me give you a current example in the market. One of the best known and largest vulnerabilities in recent times is known as Heartbleed. It was first brought public in April of 2014, and it's blamed for a 4.5 million health record data breach, among others. A recent scan of Forbes' Global 2000 companies with public-facing systems vulnerable to Heartbleed showed that 74% have still not taken every step necessary to remediate the problem. This means that over 1,200 of the world's largest and most valuable businesses are still open to breach. I cannot stress the importance of making sure that all of your hardware and software is properly patched. Not doing so is like leaving your keys in your car or leaving your house unlocked when you go on vacation. Use antivirus and anti-malware software. Also, make sure the definitions are automatically updated. I'm not going to dwell on this. You all know what antivirus and anti-malware software is and what it helps prevent. Enough said. Let's talk for a minute or two about firewalls and IDSs. So think in terms of a firewall as being the walls around your kingdom. Firewalls are designed to control the incoming and outgoing network traffic based on an applied rule set. A typical firewall establishes a barrier between a trusted, secure internal network and another network, such as the internet, that is assumed not to be secure and trusted. Some firewalls can also give you an idea of how often you're being attacked, what type of weapons are being launched against you, who the attackers are, and what sort of data is leaving your environment. Firewalls come in many forms, ranging from relatively inexpensive and simple to the ultra-sophisticated. There are lots of brands out there. Some of the better-known brands are Sonic Wall, Barracuda, and this firm's personal favorite, Palo Alto Networks. Consider installing an intrusion detection system, which is also known as an IDS. These are devices or software applications that monitor your network for malicious activities or policy violations. They also produce reports to a management station. IDSs come in a variety of flavors and approach the goal of detecting suspicious traffic in different ways. A properly configured IDS will alert you to events such as mass exfiltration of data from your system, or even traffic to and from countries you don't normally communicate with. Use strong passwords and force change them regularly. Again, something you have heard time and time again, but it bears repeating. A strong password is typically comprised of 8 characters or more, and the more characters, the stronger the password. Strong password is a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols such as the $sign, %, and or the ampersand. Passwords are typically case sensitive, so a strong password should contain letters in both upper and lower case. The last thing I want to say about passwords is that you need to set a policy that forces the user to change their passwords at least once every 60 days. This can be done automatically when they log on day 61. Doing so makes it more difficult for the hacker to guess a password, and if they do guess it, it limits the time they may be in your system. One of the best defenses against a hack is a well-trained employee. In fact, they are your first line of defense. Security awareness is the knowledge and attitude members of an organization possess regarding the protection of the physical and especially information assets of your organization. Now, many, but not all organizations require security awareness training for every employee when they're onboarded and sometimes thereafter. And that's where the problem lies. Traditional training is typically rolled out to an employee once a year, but studies show that knowledge gleaned is often forgotten within 90 days. That's why regular training is important, especially in organizations with high turnover rates and those that rely heavily on contract or temporary staff. Confirming how well your awareness program is working can be difficult, but it can be done over a period of time and also by testing employees during the training process. A common metric used looks for a downward trend in the number of incidents over time. But it's too late to find out that your security awareness training didn't work once you've suffered a preventable data breach. Remember, employees need to take ownership of security and understand that it is their responsibility, not just the organization's. Okay, so now we've taken a look at best practices. Let's explore what happens when an attack takes place. I say when and not if, because it's only a matter of time before you're attacked. That's if it hasn't already happened. So now you're under attack. Now what? What do you do? Well, the first thing is don't panic. In any crisis, the worst thing you can do is panic. This includes a cyber attack too. Here are some thoughts on what to do. First of all, activate your incident response plan and follow it. Don't try to change that plan on the fly. Tell only those who need to know that an incident has occurred. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't, but there's no value in alarming those who don't need to know that something may have occurred. Next, ascertain which system is affected and isolate it from the rest of your network. This means disconnecting it from the network. Don't shut the affected system down. I can't tell you how many times we've seen that. If you shut the system down, you may erase system logs that can tell you the who's, what's, when's, and how's of the attack. So don't shut the affected system down. Okay. Also, don't run antivirus or anti-malware software. Someone may think it's a good idea to get the problem off the system, and it may clean the machine, but in doing so, it may actually delete important evidence that may be useful in ascertaining what occurred, and if there needs to be a forensic investigation for legal reasons, that information is generally wiped out. So now that we've looked at some suggestions for dealing with an attack, let's take a look at the value of an incident response plan. An incident response plan is not to be taken lightly. It should be your roadmap to follow in the event of a breach or an attack. A well thought out and tested plan can be the difference between successfully navigating the incident or having it become a crippling blow to your organization. You need to build your plan carefully. Now, there's a lot to consider, such as who to call in what order, what to do in what order, how to isolate the affected systems, and even when to notify law enforcement. Every organization is different, and although there are templates out there, you should customize the plan for your specific environment. I would recommend that you consider retaining a third-party expert such as our company who has experience in this area and can help you make the best planning decisions for your organization. The next thing is test the plan. A successful plan is one that works, and the only way to know that it is working properly is to fully exercise it. This gives you time to make sure that it works as planned and that all will run as smoothly as possible. I cannot stress the importance of testing your plan. It's so important. It may seem like a nuisance, but finding out that your plan doesn't work well at the time of an incident is a recipe for disaster. Third bullet, follow the plan. Remember, If you have written a successful plan, it will guide you through the maze and allow you to come out the other side while minimizing collateral damage. So don't take shortcuts and don't deviate from it. Follow it. Here's another important thing to do. Update your plan regularly. And that's something, again, that most organizations fail to undertake. Things change, that's a fact. Employees change, as do their roles and responsibilities. Phone numbers and email addresses change too. So do servers, applications, and even physical locations. What good is a plan that's years old when there's an incident and you go to notify the database administrator of the problem, only to discover that his contact information is no longer viable or that he's no longer with the organization? Who do you call then, and how much critical time have you lost? Hopefully I've made my point here. Okay, so Matt, why don't we go to the final slide before the Q&A portion of this presentation? And let's spend a couple of minutes talking about business continuity and disaster recovery plans, incident response style. When I bring this up with clients, they often respond by saying, but we already have a BCDR plan. Why do we need another one, a different one? Well, like them, chances are you too have a BCDR plan all ready to go that most likely addresses how to recover from a natural or man-made event, such as a storm, a fire, or even a terrorist act. The plan probably addresses disruption to the physical environment and systems, in addition to personnel issues. And the goal of the plan, and this is important, is to revert the organization to the same state that existed prior to the event, and do that as quickly as possible. A traditional BCDR plan involves notification of numerous teams throughout the organization. And this is where the difference lies. A data incident-based BCDR plan is written to specifically address a data-related incident, such as a breach or an attack. As part of the initial planning, it's always good to refer to your business impact analysis to determine which processes need to be protected. Unlike a traditional BCDR plan that involves notification of numerous teams within the organization, a data incident BCDR plan involves far fewer notifications, but will most likely involve working with your legal department, law enforcement, and even those responsible for media relations. The reason for the substantial difference is that with this form of incident, PII, PHI, corporate confidential data, and intellectual property may have fallen into unauthorized unauthorized hands. Once the confidentiality of this data is lost, it cannot be recovered. Matt, would you like to add something to this?
No, I think you said it really quite well. I mean, and that really is the key, behind what we're talking about here. The traditional plans, you can recover and you end up back where you were. At least that's the idea. If the secret sauce for your particular product has been lost and is now overseas, you have to change your business model. Any investment you made and return on that investment that you've been hoping to have is now going to be different than what it was. If you're a pharmaceutical company and you've just developed some great drug and you haven't patented it yet, it hasn't been approved, but suddenly it's being produced overseas in a country that doesn't have so many stringent laws as far as getting things approved, that's a big shift. And that's what the difference that we're talking about. I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, because we do have a couple of questions.
No, I think that's good, Matt, and I appreciate the input here. So this ends the formal presentation of the webinar. So Matt, why don't we field a couple of the questions that have been sent over?
Sure. So one of the I'm going to sort of summarize a couple of these questions. Let me start out with this. There's a few people have asked if they can get a copy of the presentation. Certainly, I've taken down a few names here already, and I'll reach out to you who have asked. If anyone else wants, send us an email at one of these email addresses that's on the screen. We'll be happy to reach out to you. If you have any questions, I think another sort of grouping of questions that came across is there's people asking us, how can I do this? How do I get started? At such a high level with such a diverse group, it's difficult to say that there's one way to go about doing this. Every industry is different. If you have questions, absolutely, please drop us, call us, email us. We'll be happy to talk to you directly about your industry and your sector, and the sort of laws that would apply to you in either the state or country that you're resident in. We'd be happy to do that. Another major question people keep asking me about particular products. Would this product help? Would that product help? Again, it depends on the industry. I can even, look at, my clients in a single industry and see 10 different products for 9 different companies. So when we're called in, we do what's called a proof of concept to make sure that our clients are getting the right product to meet their requirements. But we don't sell those products, and that's why they trust us. So that's another major question. Lyle, maybe this one, some folks are asking, how do you justify the cost of this sort of incident response plan? And I think, we've seen in the past where a lot of people view incident response plans as sort of an insurance program.
Right. So my thoughts on this matter are as follows. It's common knowledge that it costs upwards of 8 times the amount to remediate a breach or an attack as it does to attempt to prevent it up front. Now, in addition to that cost, if you have a major incident and it goes public, and in most cases it will today because of required reporting by federal and state governments, if it goes public, you're going to take such a hit reputational-wise. And how do you recover from that? There's no way to put a dollar sign on any of that. The best example of that, again, I hearken back to Target, is people have stopped shopping at Target, and that's their reputation because they don't trust the entity. One of the earliest slides, I think it was probably the 4th slide, talked about the fact that 54% of people whose banks were breached said they would go and bank elsewhere, and 24% said they would stop donating to their alma mater. You have to trust who you do business with. Your customers, your clients have to trust you. So spending the money up front to try to protect yourself is money well spent. Matt, what other questions do we have?
Okay, some folks have asked, how do we get started?
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly recognize a lot of our clients, they know that they need to do this, but they don't know where to start. In general, I'd say, performing a business impact analysis, a risk assessment, and a threat assessment right up front is a great way to get started. Understanding where that data is and what the real risks are in your industry, and then generating a roadmap. We do that for our clients all the time to just get the ball rolling, to understand, okay, here's your projects for the next 6 months, for the next year, for the next 2 weeks. You can have some quick wins up front. There's some more longer range things of, implementing tools and so forth and getting funding for all that stuff. But just getting started with a quick assessment is usually a great first step.
Okay. Matt, we have a question here. What roles do attorneys play in preparing for and responding to cyber intrusions? Well, first of all, we're not a law firm, so we're not giving any sort of legal advice here. Want to cover ourselves on that one. But from our experience, if you've got an in-house corporate counsel or you're working with a private law firm that represents your organization, it's always good to consider bringing them in. They're going to look at it from a different viewpoint than a business person or an IT person. They will maybe do the research on what the reporting rules are, on how best to handle the situation if, for instance, personally identifiable information is spilled or stolen versus personal health information, PHI, which is completely different from PII. It's completely different from credit card information and has very specific requirements for reporting the loss of that data. So it's probably a good idea to pass your plan by, and better yet, maybe even work with counsel prior to the event. And as far as responding to cyber intrusions, absolutely. If you've had a cyber intrusion, you definitely should bring legal in. They're going to give you the best advice possible as far as how to minimize your downside risk, whether it's from a regulatory compliance standpoint or from a civil lawsuit, or maybe even in some cases a criminal standpoint. Matt, what other questions do we have here?
There was one question earlier. It says that, well, if it's going to happen anyway, if it's not a matter of, of if, but when, why bother with any of the security controls at all? The short answer is that security controls really do prevent a lot of attacks. I mean, in the same way that you don't leave your door open when you leave your house, you could pull the door shut and lock it. That doesn't mean that a criminal can't break the window. It just makes it harder for them. The more controls you have, certainly the more secure you are, the lower the likelihood. But we're talking about likelihood. A lot of people ask questions about cyber insurance. That's sort of a big, something a lot of people are looking into, the cost of cyber insurance. Cyber insurance rates go down the more controls you have. So the better off you are to begin with, the lower rates you're gonna pay. So you can either pay the insurance company or you can really try and protect yourself. So that was one of the questions. Was there anything else?
Matt, actually, you just got another really good question in. And it says, how should we respond to customers auditing us and asking for the right to test our network every year? So there are a couple of things that I'd like to comment on regarding this. As far as responding to customers auditing your organization, it really depends on what your business is and what your relationship to that customer is. We have clients in the financial sector who do work for major banks. Their customer is the bank, and they have to meet certain requirements in order to continue doing business with that bank. So the bank has said, you need to be audited. Generally, it's not the bank that does the auditing, but what they say is you need to bring in a third-party independent firm, such as Janus, to prove to us that your controls are in place and that they're being followed in an appropriate fashion. Matt, could you just scroll down the screen a little bit so I can read the rest of that question, please? Okay. And also the question talks in terms of, where are we here? Asking for the right to test our network every year. Do they have the right to ask that? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the question really is, how much do you value your business relationship? If your house is in order, if your security controls are in place, then you shouldn't be concerned about being audited once a year. If you have something to hide, or if your systems aren't secure, then certainly you don't want the auditors coming in.
And let's be honest, there are some organizations who are under audits all the time. Mm-hmm. There are certain banks, certain federal entities are just constantly being audited. There's an entire team of people just to manage the auditors. So there's no do the audit and then you go away for 9 or 10 months. It's just constant filtering of audits.
Okay. What other good questions do we have here? Where are we here? Bear with us one second while we scroll through a rather huge list.
Thanks for all the questions, by the way. This is good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Pause for 1 second. Okay, here's a good one. You mentioned that other departments besides IT are involved in the BCDR for data incidents. How do you recommend involving them in testing plans, or to convince them that this is not just an IT issue?
Which one is that? Right. So in the past, we always thought of disaster recovery as being an IT issue. Business continuity would maybe be outside of IT because there would be manual procedures. in this case, when the data is lost, it's really a hit against the business. It may have been IT's, lack of controls that allowed the attack to happen. But in the case of social engineering, there's almost nothing that could have been done. But if that data is lost, if the research that the pharmaceutical company has been doing, for the new latest greatest cancer drug is now lost, that really impacts the business. And that's where the legal department comes in and media relations department comes in. And as we know, if it's going to impact, stockholder relationships, you may need to do that as well.
Great, super. Matt, here's my favorite question of the day. We're in the process of developing an incident response planning system. Would your organization be available for hire to help us define the requirements? My favorite question of the day. Absolutely, yes. Thank you. We will definitely be in touch with you. Let's see, we have another question here. If you still have Windows XP workstations, what vendors are still providing antivirus, anti-malware updates for this OS? I'm not sure.
I mean, if you're running XP still, you may have other issues than just, antivirus and malware. I mean, the fact that it's not being patched, is really a sort of larger issue. I would definitely recommend moving to, a newer version of the operating system. Unfortunately, I know, especially in some of our clients that are running industrial control systems, they're just getting off of NT because the industrial control system had a 20-year life cycle. And sometimes you can't do that. The key there is to, airlock those things, put them in their own network. They're not going to do any updates. Don't let them talk to the internet. Don't let the internet talk to them. Let one management workstation touch them. Really lock them down where possible.
Okay. Well, great. Matt, it looks like that's about all the questions we have. I don't see any more coming in. So let's see. Any more coming in?
No, I think we're all set. That's it.
Okay. So
right up to the mark on we're almost.
Right. So all of you who attended today's webinar will be receiving copies of best practices for response and also reporting of cyber incidents and also a cyber incident a cyber incident preparedness checklist. And you should be receiving that within the next 5 days. I hope that going forward, you'll consider everybody here at Janus as your partner for IT security and privacy related services. Today's presentation will be available online for rebroadcast, and we will notify all of you when it becomes available. On behalf of Matt Lane and everybody at Janus Associates, I'd like to thank all of you for your time today, and this concludes the presentation.